Hey there, welcome to YouTube. If you are into poetry, if you are into literature, if you are into cultural history, then you've come to the right place. Cardboard Box Productions makes podcasts about all those things, so be sure to click the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so that you never miss a new episode. Obviously, we mostly make podcasts, so you can also go to anywhere you get your podcasts, if it's a place other than YouTube, like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and you can subscribe to our podcast feeds there. All right, I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello and welcome to Close Talking, the world's most popular poetry analysis podcast from Cardboard Box Productions Incorporated. I am co-host Jack Rossiter Munley, and with my good friend Connor McNamara Stratton, we read a poem,
talk about the poem,
and read the poem again.
Before we get into today's selection, a quick note that if you like what we do here at Close Talking and have a spare minute of your time, it would mean the world to us if you would give the podcast a rating and review on Apple Podcasts.
Those ratings and reviews help boost us up the algorithm and find new listeners.
And if you have suggestions for future episodes or comments on this one, you can send us an email at closetalkingpoetry@gmail.com.
And you can also find us on social media. On Twitter, the show is @CloseTalking. I am @Jack Rossiter Munn, and Connor is @Connor M. Stratton. On Instagram, the show is @CloseTalkingPoetry, and on Facebook, it's facebook.com/CloseTalking. We also have a website, closetalking.com, where you can find all the past episodes of the show, and Cardboard Box Productions has just launched a newsletter, Unboxed, and if you go to cardboardboxproductionsinc.com, you can subscribe for more behind-the-scenes stuff on Close Talking and all of the other literary and cultural history podcasts that Cardboard Box Productions makes. On with the show. Welcome to another thrilling episode of Close Talking with Jack Rossiter Munley.
And Connor McNamara Stratton.
Yes, indeed. 2 men, 6 names, 1 love of poetry.
Yeah.
Connor is an MFA student at the University of
Minnesota.
And I have a USB microphone.
And is a freelance writer based in New York City. He writes for Troll Tennis. He loves Roger Federer. He has 2 cats. He also loves Bruce Springsteen.
Oh, man. Yeah. We're going to talk about Bruce Springsteen on one of these podcasts. I'm warning you now, faithful listeners, of whom there are some.
Yeah, hopefully by this point we'll have 1 or 2.
There are annoying poems, I'm sure there are, about Roger Federer, but the poetry of his motion cannot be adequately discussed by us.
That's true.
You should just watch it once he's done being injured, so I don't want to talk about that. But we will, in all likelihood, be discussing at least a verse of a Bruce Springsteen song at some point, because I can't not. It's like my obligation to humanity.
I feel like it's already happened.
I have definitely written something about Bruce and literature and things. So that's a little besides the point. Today we are here to talk about Still I Rise by Maya Angelou. So I selected the poem. Jack, I'm going to read it. Still I rise. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room? Just like moons and like suns with the certainty of tides, just like hopes springing high, still I'll rise. Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes? Shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard? 'Cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still like air I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out in the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean, leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise.
It's a classic.
It is a classic. I picked this poem because it is a classic.
Yeah.
And it is pretty clearly a classic for a reason.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God.
But yeah, I picked it because it has actually shown up a couple of places recently, and I'm always interested when poetry sort of hops over into popular culture, and I feel like this poem, largely because of its really positive message, it's very sort of clearly laid out what's going on in the poem. It's the fact I'll rise or I rise is a really easy refrain to get behind. Recently, returning to tennis, appropriately enough, Serena Williams tied Steffi Graf's all-time Grand Slam record for a woman, which is higher than the men's. So
22, right?
22.
Serena Williams is so good.
She is insanely good. It's kind of, I mean, it's amazing, but at this point it's like hard to be amazed because she's been doing it for like 16 years or something.
Right.
It's completely ridiculous.
I'll keep watching.
18 years.
It's great. She's great.
Never stop, Serena, if you're listening. And also, if you're listening, whoa. Dang. But anyway, after she won her record-tying 22nd Grand Slam singles title, by the way, after winning that, she then went on to win doubles with her sister. So
in the same day.
So she finished winning her match, did all of the like, oh, I won everything, I'm the best. Like all the press tour and everything.
Yeah.
Then went back on court and won doubles with her sister to just sort of complete her perfection. It's ridiculous.
That was absolutely bonkers.
She's crazy. Also, her older sister, who is pushing like closer to 40 than 30, made it to the quarterfinals, semifinals.
Oh, really?
One of the two. Like, it's ridiculous. Anyway.
Oh, jeez.
After she accomplished this, probably before because that's how advertising works, but after she accomplished this, a compilation video of Serena Williams playing and like being places was put together over her reading Still I Rise.
Okay.
Which is pretty powerful. This poem is like pretty obviously about the experience of being a black woman, and Serena has more cause than most to be interested in talking about that, not just because she is a black woman, but because she is a major figure in popular culture and she's risen up through sport, which is traditionally white and male.
Yeah, and tennis especially.
And tennis especially, because like country clubs and a whole bunch of other nonsense. Yeah. But also, it was referenced by Cory Booker at the Democratic National Convention in his speech, where, in my opinion, he was trying a little too hard to make a moment, referenced Still I Rise as just a general sort of affirmation and a principle for the party to get behind. Booker himself is African American, and a big theme of the convention was having the Democratic Party not only step into the void left by the GOP of sort of because of their, hate fest, just Trump-devil, fucktastic nonsense of the week before, was to step in and be the party of America. And so there was a lot of flags, there was a lot of military, veterans, all sorts of different people to represent that, but it was also about having a message for a big tent. And Booker, as a keynote speaker, is in some ways doing it because he's pegged by many as the future of the party, also because he represents in his presence, and then went on to do so in his speech, a big tent vision of the country. And I think part of referencing I Rise was a callback to that, and not just about, like trying to make a moment out of returning to that theme to get people to shout it back, which he was doing a little call and response, in itself a feature of the black church. So that too is a little bit of a cultural moment.
Yeah, so that sort of gets at this poem's like contemporary presence.
Right, and it's very popular. One of the things that Booker said when he was starting to get into the I Rise section of his speech, actually, is he kept saying, y'all know it.
Yeah.
Y'all know it.
Yeah.
Because he started the poem, you write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies, and I would bet that first stanza of the poem is the best known of all of them.
Yeah.
Because it's super clear, and it's the message that can be for anybody.
Yeah.
You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust I'll rise. Maya Angelou is talking about black women when she says, write me down in history with bitter, twisted lies. But that can be like, theoretically, anybody who's feeling a little hard done by.
Right. Well, it was interesting, we were talking before, you mentioned those two instances of it coming up, and you wanted to bring this poem up because, like, this poem often gets quoted but not in its entirety.
Yes.
Which I think gets at an interesting, like, the poem gets more specific to what it's talking about when you read the whole thing, but if you just take the first stanza and like the last refrain, then it becomes much more quote-unquote universal sounding.
Definitely. And in fact, when Serena reads it in this little, it's a little over 2-minute video of her reading it, she does not read the second verse, which starts right off with, does my sassiness upset you? And I think the trope of the sassy black woman is pretty prevalent, and that word, much like it used to be uppity, applied to African Americans disparagingly, is a word that is often used in that specific context of talking about black women, and that's really where the turn in the poem happens.
Yeah, so pretty quick.
And it's like, does my sassiness upset you? Why are you so upset? Why does it beset you with gloom? Is it because I walk with a lot of confidence? Like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room, like because I walk like I'm all that? Is that what you're mad about?
Yeah.
You know, which I really would have liked to hear Serena read, because I feel like that's where a lot of the criticism of her happens. She's a very confident person for incredibly good reason, because at the age of 34 she is dominating the women's tennis tour like basically no one in history, and to do that at any age, much less when you're like theoretically way beyond your prime, is incredible. And she is one of the most amazing athletes in the history of the game, or like any sport, and people should just get used to it. But she still has to deal with so much bullshit.
Yeah, so much bullshit. And as a slight side note, the book Citizen by Claudia Rankine also thinks through a lot of Serena Williams stuff very poignantly, but also very critically, and is specifically dealing with the way Serena Williams has been, basically racistly criticized for any outburst or anything that's not the most polite thing that she's displayed on the court. Great book.
It's a really good book.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's rare that you hear all the stanzas of this poem, which I think is interesting. In the Serena one, they also, everything from does my haughtiness offend you through the stanza about sexiness is not used. So it really is.
Oh, interesting.
It's the first verse, the third verse, and then the final refrain. So it's all of the most universal and exciting and uplifting parts, which, it's a universal, exciting, and uplifting moment when you tie one of the greatest all-time records in your sport. But as a moment for Serena Williams as a popular culture figure, a poem about a black woman that takes out the verses that are most explicit about making it about a black woman and certain aspects of the confidence and the sexual nature of an African American woman, and like Serena's got it going on and she knows it. The fact that part is not going to get celebrated is a really interesting erasure. Because those are exactly the elements of Serena's personality and presence that have been the most challenging.
I wonder I wonder if that was Serena's choice or if she read the whole poem and then someone else edited it out. That would be something to look into.
And I don't know. And maybe that's the version that she was given to read, and no matter what, it's still a Maya Angelou poem getting shared millions of times on the internet with Serena Williams. So it's not like it's bad, it's just interesting to note.
For sure.
Connor earlier was kind enough to mention my upset interest in Bruce Springsteen. One of the things that he talked about at Pete Seeger's 90th birthday party at Madison Square Garden is when the two of them were getting ready to perform at Barack Obama's inauguration, which they did, and they sang "This Land Is Your Land." And so he was talking to Pete Seeger. Pete Seeger at that point started to lose his voice. He was talking to him about how are we going to approach, performing this song, because it's a big song. Again, much like I Rise, it's a song where everybody knows this land is your land.
Yeah.
This land is my land. Like, it's
Yeah.
a campfire song, everybody knows it.
Yeah.
And Pete Seeger's response to how we're going to approach it is, I don't know, but I want to sing all the verses.
Oh, interesting.
And there are verses in that song that are regularly left out about, there's a sign that says no trespassing, but the back of that sign doesn't say anything.
Yeah.
That side was made for you and me. So it's transgressive verse.
Yeah.
And then another one about the unemployment line.
Okay.
And so part of Springsteen's point is that what makes Pete Seeger an interesting figure is that he sings all the verses all the time.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting to note when there are these broadly known sort of cultural touchstone artistic statements
Yeah.
where some of the verses are
Yeah.
judiciously left
Right.
out because they are troublesome.
Right.
And it was interesting to me when these two latest iterations of I Rise came out, that's like
Yeah.
pretty conscious erasures of big parts of the poem.
Right. Right. Yeah, so this is the You May Shoot Me With Your Words stanza cut out of there? Or is that one in? Do you know?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I think it may have gotten taken out, which surprised me because that seemed like another one that would be pretty universal.
Yeah. But yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, getting into the poem, I like all of it, but I really like that stanza because one interesting part is that one gets to it. Like, you may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still like air I'll rise. It is acknowledging in full force the power of the oppression that the you is capable of sort of like delivering upon the speaker or Maya Angelou. And I think that's an important, I don't know, for some reason that distinction always felt important in that she's never saying none of this affects me or like none of this is, hurting me, but it's like within all that I will still rise up. And I like that her two similes are but still like dust I'll rise and but still like air I'll rise. And the dust, it works because it comes after you may trod me in the very dirt. So it's coming from where the you has put her. But it also is it's striking because dust is not normally thought of as like a strong sort of item in the world, and you have it's often like sort of a death symbol, ash to ash, dust to dust, and it's a remain that is not thought of.
It doesn't have much value.
Right. And similarly, but still like air I'll rise. That's an invisible thing, but also it's ubiquitous.
It's interesting because there's also this idea that there's sort of great value, but it's not with the person. So there's like these other touchstones of things that are very valuable. Oil wells in the living room. There's gold in the backyard.
Yeah.
But that's back at the house. I'm out in the world.
Right.
Like, I'm acting like I've got a place that gives me power and strength.
Yeah.
And for that, I am criticized. For that, I am, being trod in the dirt. Because I am willing to think that I have confidence.
Right.
Because I have something that gives me that confidence or that presence about
Right.
me. That, part of it is acknowledging that strong negative reaction is against something that you're putting out.
Right.
Whether it's your very existence or it's your way of moving through the world, that's coming from somewhere. And that somewhere is this value that's elsewhere.
Yeah.
I'm the dust.
Right.
I'm not someone that's given value.
Right.
But I'm acting like it comes from somewhere.
Right.
And that's really reacted against.
Yeah, no, and that's another cool part. I feel like those moments are speaking to the power of like simile and like metaphor in like a person's life, because it's kind of like, because she doesn't have gold mines, but she doesn't need them, and she's just acting like, she has this confidence because she is able to put herself somewhere else, like as in a sort of simile. I don't know. that was just an interesting moment when I read it this time that I hadn't thought of.
Definitely. Well, it's also sort of the idea that there's always, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. If you push me in the dirt, whenever you push anything in the dirt, dust rises up.
Yeah.
Whenever you try to force things down, something's going to come
Right.
up. And I think that's also interesting because if you look at everything that has to do with her and all of the things that give her power, oil wells, you drill down and the oil rises up. Gold mines, you drill down and the gold comes out.
Right.
Every time you're going down, something,
Right.
either personal value, like the dust or the air I rise,
Right.
or material value, the
Yeah.
oil and the gold comes out of the dirt and
Right.
the dust.
Right.
It's coming from somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that the oil wells and the gold mines are just like pumping and digging on their own. Like no one's like doing any of the work. There's just
It's just
the
happening.
gold mines are digging, and she's just got them.
It's like that well of confidence.
Yeah.
It's that well of whatever you got.
Yeah. It's cool.
It's really cool. The one area that also sticks out to me is, did you want to see me broken, bowed head, and lowered eyes? Because that, to me, reminds me of another very widely used and famous poem, Invictus, where your head is bloody but unbowed.
Right. Interesting.
And that poem is all about, a lot of times, white dudes. It was written by a white man, William Ernest Henry, I think is his name.
You got it.
Henley?
Henley.
Okay. William Ernest Henley. So a man with only 2 first names, not 3 first names. But anyway, so like the whole point of the poem is like this very universally applicable statement of power and resilience. My head is bloody but unbowed. I'm the master of my fate. I'm the captain of my soul.
Right.
Really big, broad language.
Right.
And to me, my head is bloody but unbowed. To me, do you want me with a bowed head and lowered eyes? Do you want to see me broken? That to me, bloody but unbowed, broken with a bowed head, it's very evocative to me of that poem, which is another sort of touchstone of resilience.
Yeah, I think she's probably writing against that in that instance for sure.
And in a lot of ways, I think Still I Rise is sort of an Invictus type poem. Written by a black woman for a black woman.
Yeah. And the other, this is an obvious feature, but I think it's interesting, and I think will especially be when we think about the other poems that we've been talking about in other episodes. The direct address to the you is very notable in this poem.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's just like, it's very intense, and especially when you think about the reader, that insistence on the question, all of those questions that are posed to the you, those are also questions posed to the reader. And when you read it, you are getting asked those questions. Whereas the poem could, just if the poem was only like I'll rise and you took out all of those yous, it would still be an interesting poem, but it's roping in of the other person who is doing this oppressive work.
Yeah, just reading the first line. Write me down in history with bitter, twisted lies, trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust I'll rise.
Yeah.
It makes the point, but it's not as direct. It's not as pointed.
Yeah. And it works as well because, like we've been talking about, it has this universal, or at least kind of like epic scope, and yet it's formed as a one-to-one address, and I think that speaks to a lot of the power of this poem.
Definitely. And that's why it still gets trotted out.
Yeah.
In all sorts of different contexts.
I know. That's great.
All right. I'll read it again.
Yeah.
Still I rise. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room? Just like moons and like suns with the certainty of tides. Just like hopes springing high, still I'll rise. Did you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops weakened by my soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean, leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise.
Cool. Yeah, one other great part of this is just the rhyme scheme. I mean, it's a very sort of, I would guess you could say, traditional quatrain form.
Fairly traditional, yeah.
But I think it works, and so in some ways it could feel, it was written sort of like after free verse had sort of announced itself and everyone was fine with not rhyming.
Right, the poem, just for reference, the poem I believe was written in 1978.
Yeah.
When Maya Angelou was 50.
Okay, that's good to know. There you go. So it's a very deliberate choice to have rhyming quatrain. And, whereas if it was Shakespearean era, then no one would pay any attention to that, I think. Although there's work you can do within the rhyme. But anyway, blah, blah, blah. But I think that the rhyme scheme works specifically with the content of the poem, just in the insistence of the rising. So when you hear the certainty of the tides that the speaker is going to rise at the end of the quatrain. And when you may cut me with your eyes, that she's going to rise at the end. And
right.
So I think that's an important formal move that Angelou is doing here that I just wanted to emphasize.
All right, another successful episode of Close Talking. This is co-host Jack Rossiter Munley. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, head on over to Apple Podcasts, leave a review. 5 stars maybe? Those reviews help with the algorithm and are a great way for us to find new listeners. And you can put anything in them. You can write whatever you want. You can just say, oh, this is a good podcast. I like this podcast. You could be like, hey, that Connor guy, he makes a lot of good points. Jack, why is he doing this outro so long? Get him off the mic. And whatever you feel like writing, head on over there, 5 stars, drop in the review. Do you have thoughts about this poem? Is there a poem or poet you'd like us to cover on a future episode? Well, we'd love to hear from you. And there are tons of ways that you can get in touch with us. I mean, I guess you could drop it into an iTunes review. You could be like 5 stars. Hey, why don't you talk about insert name of poet here? But you can also send us an email. That's probably the best way to do it. closetalkingpoetry@gmail.com is our email address. Or you can find us on Twitter. I am at Jack Rossiter Munn. Connor is at Connor M. Stratton. And the show is at Close Talking. On Instagram, you can find us there too. We are at Close Talking Poetry. And we are on Facebook at facebook.com/Close Talking. We haven't gotten to TikTok yet. And we might never. Who knows? Anything is possible. Speaking of all those social media platforms, a very special thank you to our incredible social media manager, Corey Chena, who keeps us active across the internet. And a thank you to all of you for listening. We will see you next time.